Hello everybody, welcome to my channel. My name is Circe and my talk today is going to be over cybersecurity. Why exactly should I care about cybersecurity? Why should we care about making sure that our information is safe and secure? Why should we care what our phones do, what our computers do? Good question. Why should we care? So, what if I told you that the American government has been spying on its citizens? Uh, Everybody probably knows more or less about Watergate. You would think that Watergate would have been the first incident of this. Wrong. 1928. A case called Olmsted versus United States. Now, in Olmsted versus United States, well, a little bit of background first. In 1914, which is 14 years prior to Olmsted versus United States, a Supreme Court case called Week versus U.S. ruled unanimously that illegal seizure was, well, illegal based on Fourth Amendment rights. So here we are 14 years later with Olmsted versus United States. And the Supreme Court was hearing this case. Roy Olmsted challenged the use of evidence obtained from wiretaps, violated his and others' Fourth and Fifth Amendment rights. Olmsted and a bunch of petitioners basically were convicted in the mid-1920s for violating National Prohibition Act, which was basically the illegal to make and move your own alcohol. It was during the time when that whole thing was illegal. And so here you see the Supreme Court decided that evidence from wiretaps placed by federal officials without judicial approval is actually permissible, and that allowing the wiretaps did not violate the suspected bootlegger's Fourth Amendment rights, as the case involved phone conversations and not physical artifacts. Now, let me just stop here and point something out. If, in fact, they used phone conversations to record this, in that time, you didn't have a phone unless you were in your own home. So, how exactly is the Fourth Amendment rights not being violated? How did those phone taps get there? Is basically what I'm pointing out to you. These are phones in their own home. Does that make sense? So they're saying that the government, the FBI, does in fact have the right to listen in on phone conversations in your own home as early as 1928. So this decision eventually got overturned in a 1967 case, Katz versus United States. However, we'll get into a little bit of what was going on in that time period in a little while. So, I think a lot of people probably know a very infamous case of wiretapping incident.
Yeah, sir. You might want to send a maintenance man over to that office across the way. The lights are off and they must be looking for a fuse box or something because them flashlights, they're keeping me awake.
Anyways, so yeah, the Watergate wiretapping case, um, or known as the Watergate scandal. Yeah, we all know of Nixon as being Mr. Big Bad Evil Guy. He was the president during that time period. And in fact, I believe he was the only U.S. president to have resigned his position in the midst of a scandal and over this case. So here we are thinking, oh yeah, Watergate, big bad evil guy, you know. Oh, and here's Hoover, the president before him, uh, who just so happened to be the president that was in office during the previous mentioned Olmsted versus United States. Good old Herbert Hoover. Yeah, so, just goes to show that just because uh, one president does something really big, bad, and evil and horrific, doesn't mean the others who weren't brought into the limelight are good guys. So, okay, so you're probably going to say, yeah, well, sure, whatever, seriously. Modern day FBI doesn't even put wiretaps on my phone. They're not listening in. Okay, well, does your cell phone happen to have this app? What about this one? Does it have this operating system? Or, this operating system? Do you happen to have this on your phone? If you're running any of these on your phone, your computer, your whatever home entertainment system, uh, these all collect personal data and information and send it to the FBI, to the government, to whoever wants it, frankly. Um, Anybody can get a hold of these records, but especially the government, especially the FBI, especially CIA, NSA, whoever wants them. So you're not protected just because you're not a criminal. So here's a little bit about how all of this is possible. So the Patriot Act was signed in 2001 by the Bush administration. Yes, that Bush. Uh, Supposedly to significantly expand the search and surveillance powers of federal law enforcement and intelligence agencies. This all came about after the attacks of 9/11. We're not going to go into that conspiracy theory in this video. I might do one later about it, maybe. Panic about potential terrorist movements was at a very significant high at that time, and people wanted to see action. People wanted to know what the government's response was to this. And so this was the government's response, was basically to sign into law, um, giving powers to the powers that be to search and surveil anyone and everyone, just anyone and everyone, basically. Um, National Security Letter Program was a legal search and seizure authorization that forced banks, phone companies, internet, and many others to hand data to the government without having to go through surveillance court. Now, that is the fairly significant part there. Surveillance court would have been able to give oversight to limit what could be done. Basically, they would go in and they would say, we suspect so and so of terrorist activity. And the surveillance court would be like, okay, well, where's your proof? And they would say, right here, they were spotted going around with so and so of this terrorist movement. And they would say, sounds reasonable. You might want to look and see what's going on. However, the NSL program basically cut that surveillance court out of the loop and said, you now have free reign to do whatever you want to do. Go on, go for it. And this was allowed under Section 215, which also allowed for the lone wolf provision, which allowed governments to surveil foreign persons who were engaged in international terrorism but lacked connection to terrorist groups and other foreign powers. Now, let me break that down for you for a second. This lone wolf provision allowed the government to surveil foreign individuals who were engaged in international terrorism but lacked connection to terrorist groups and other foreign power. How are you going to be engaged in terrorism, international terrorism, and not have any connections to a terrorist group or a foreign power? How does that make? Oh, so basically, what you're telling me here, Circe, is uh, if you're of a certain specific race that is foreign to America, you are gonna get followed. Yeah, yeah, that's exactly what it is. That's exactly what it is. I have proof in another slide. Let me show you. Section 215 was used to listen in on citizens' conversations, and it also is what exposed the now famous Edward Snowden, and it led to him having to flee the United States. Um, that's not supposed to be prosecution, that's supposed to be persecution. Close, but not quite. So, basically, the government's spying on everybody now at this point. This is Bush and all his buddies signing in the Patriot Act. Uh, Americans are not pleased. Huh, shocking, right? They don't want uh, they don't want George Orwell to, be a prophet. So this was the Privacy and Civil Liberties Oversight Board in 2014, after the Patriot Act had been um, in act for quite some time. Uh, Not a single instance had they identified a threat to the United States in which the program made a concrete difference in the outcome of a counterterrorism investigation. Moreover, they were aware of no instance in which the program directly contributed to the discovery of a previously unknown terrorist plot or the disruption of a terrorist attack. These people basically are coming forward and saying, we have absolutely zero conclusive evidence that this Patriot Act thing is doing a thing for us. So, why does the government still have this? Why is this still being done? Why? Here are some things that the Patriot Act has caused. These are some things that um, the Patriot Act was used for. In February 2003, I don't want to butcher this guy's name, so I'm not going to say it. He was a student at the University of Idaho. He was charged because he did computer work for Muslims on how to use computers. He was investigated and charged for this. I mean, actually, okay, anyways. May 2004, Brandon Mayfield. This poor guy. He was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Actually, he never was in this place whatsoever. Um, Basically, he was arrested on suspicion of involvement in March 11th, 2004 Madrid bombings that killed 191 people. Eventually, the FBI released him because they admitted his fingerprint had been mistakenly matched with one found at the scene of the Madrid attacks. It, the government, the algorithm, the DNA analysis said, yeah, this dude was here. But he never was. He was never there. They let him go, but I'm sure they probably half ruined his life in just arresting him on suspicion. This is my favorite. I can't pronounce that guy's last name. I don't know what it is. Uh, David of New Jersey got his kids a laser pointer off of the internet and was teaching them astronomy, pointing it up at the night sky. And he was prosecuted for shining the handheld laser pointer at an aircraft and initially said that it was his daughter using the laser pointer. It probably was his daughter using the laser pointer initially. But whenever the FBI comes busting down doors, they don't care if you're 3 or 30. They don't care about any of that. You just lied to the FBI. So, anyways, he took responsibility for it. And he got prosecuted. He got fined a hefty, hefty fine. Wasn't good. So yeah, that's our Patriot Act. That's what it's been doing for us. Now, yeah, it's the law. What else is the law? Oh, just this nice little thing called our Fourth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. It is the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures. And it shall not be violated, no warrants shall issue, but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. In other words, that lone wolf provision cut out that surveillance court, and now the Fourth Amendment is entirely down the drain. But, you know, it's totally the Fourth Amendment, you know. It, yeah, it's totally okay. It's fine. So, here's the bottom line. In theory, it sounds like a very useful thing. It could definitely help prevent terrorism. In practice, it is not being used to prevent terrorism. It is used to be racist. It is used to harm citizens who have done absolutely nothing wrong. It has been used to break into people's homes and say, hey, you little girl with the laser pointer, put that down, you're going to jail. you know? Um, and the government just continues pushing reforms and amendments to this that furthers the abuse of this. This is a really scary thing. Um, so initially it was passed in 1966, but um, it lacked the teeth necessary to make government comply. Basically, it was not strong enough. Government said, yeah, I'm not listening to that, whatever. 1974, after Watergate, they revisited it, added a few things here and there. Still not going to comply. In 76, they did some reforms that required government agencies to open meetings to the public. Yeah, they're not really going to do that. In 82, under the Reagan administration, they passed an executive order that created new classification rules that made withholding sensitive government info uh, as response to the Freedom of Information Act easier. So, in other words, if the government wanted to withhold information, Reagan decided, yeah, we'll make it a little easier for you to do that. Sure, here you go. Here's some laws. In 1996, they came out with the Electronic Freedom of Information Act Amendment, which required agencies to make documents available in electronic form to be digitally distributed upon request, which sounds great, right? I'll get into that in a second. In 2007, Bush signed the Open Government Act, which extended services to news media and the established offices of government information services. That's a lot to say, sorry. To oversee government compliance with the Freedom of Information Act. Basically, Bush signed an act that said, let the news media come in here and, find out information if they need it. Because freedom of press, right? It's in our amendments. And established this Office of Government Information Services that would ensure that the government was being held responsible to comply with the Freedom of Information Act. And then in 2016, Obama administration passed Freedom of Information Act Improvement Act, and it required federal agencies to create central online portal for anyone to file a request for information, and also put a 25-year limit on federal agencies' ability to withhold classified documents. Basically, you have 25 years, and at the end of those 25 years, you have to release those documents. Again, it sounds great, right? Basically, these acts were supposed to support public's right to access government records from the meeting minutes of local municipality to documents revealing incorrect reporting of the most I still don't know if I can say that yet, the most recent viral outbreak causing deaths in New York nursing homes. You can find out this information, quote unquote, from the government. All you have to do is go to their portal. I mean, we all know how easy it is to get information from the government. We know how easy it is to get in touch with our government, right? Right? Anyone sat on a very long wait line for their taxes recently? Yeah. So, Stephen Dealey, I don't know, Director of Labor Policy and Workers for Opportunities at the Mackinac Center for Public Policy, says it remains common for government to resist transparency efforts, either by failing to provide the infrastructure necessary to process open records requests, in other words, refusing to make the buildings, get the jobs in, all that stuff, or through a simple unwillingness to apply freedom of information laws in a manner consistent with their purposes. Basically saying, nah, not going to do that. These requests are frequently met with delayed responses, require excessive fees, and end up with heavily redacted information. If they don't want you to know it, you're not going to know it. Now, on top of all of that, the Freedom of Information Act authorized 9 exemptions. Of those, one of the most frequently used is the B3 exemption. It authorizes withholding information under the Act based on another federal statute that prohibits disclosure of the information. Yes, you heard that right. Another federal statute was passed that basically said we don't have to listen to any other acts or bills or laws that are passed that say we have to give you this information. Under the B3 exemption, NSA says, NSA Act of 1959 to conceal waste, fraud, abuse, mismanagement, and even criminal conduct from you, the American taxpayers. Section 6 states nothing in this act or any other law shall be construed to require disclosure of the organization or any function of NSA or any information with respect to activities thereof, or of names, titles, salaries, or number of persons employed. This act, passed in 1959, basically is a reverse Uno card for the NSA. This is a I don't care what you gonna say, I'm gonna do what I want to do. It is a get out of jail free card, literally. Wow, so that's really scary, right? I know, that's super scary. What's being done about this Illuminati? You know, don't worry about the Illuminati because the government's way scarier. I don't even know that the Illuminati is real. What are people doing to fix this? You know, is everybody just sitting there and complying with this? I mean, no, no, they're not. Um, but the people who are sacrificing their freedom are people like Edward Snowden. Let me tell you a little bit about Edward Snowden. He is being villainized by a lot of people, but he's also being, saluted by a lot of people, which is good. Snowden was born in North Carolina, moved to Maryland. He went into the Army at some point. There's a Wikipedia about him, okay? You can find that information out. He went into the Army and he broke both of his legs in a training accident. I'm thinking probably parachuting training. The government weirdly continues to claim that he was discharged after 5 months in the Army for shin splints, not broken legs. Now, I looked up what shin splints are and they sound really painful too. So, I mean, honestly, even if it was just shin splints and not broken legs, like that's nothing to sneeze over. Um, but regardless, like of all the things they're gonna argue over, oh yeah, he's such a bad guy because he was discharged for shin splints. He couldn't hack it. What? Okay. Anyway, so 2 years after he was discharged from the army, he goes to work for NSA. And while he's working for NSA, he starts discovering some really shady things going on and gets a little, you know, upset. He's seeing this information that shows that the government is looking into people in ways that should be illegal. But it's not, apparently. Um, he also went on to do computer consulting for some large companies like Dell that had very, very high security clearance because they were working, obviously on government computers. He came across an NSA program called Prism that was basically going to allow real-time information collecting um, in the form of a machine. It was a machine that they were building, and that was scary. That was scary to him, and so he took this to the press. And how was he repaid? We'll get into how he was repaid in a minute. Snowden had to say this when he was being interviewed by The Guardian and The Washington Post. He fled to Hong Kong originally to give his interviews. He was so terrified. Not. He probably was terrified. I would have been terrified too. But he was concerned that he wouldn't be able to get this information out if he stayed in America. So he went over to Hong Kong and he said, "Hey, news reporters, I've got some information to share with you, but you got to come to me." And so he said, "I'm willing to sacrifice my former life because I can't, in good conscience, allow the US government to destroy privacy, internet freedom, and basic liberties for people around the world with this massive surveillance machine that they're secretly building." He gave up his freedom knowing that he would have to go on the run or be imprisoned because he wanted to get the truth out. And so if you see anything in the news that's massacring Edward Snowden, oh, whistleblower, oh, bad guy, snitch, Edward Snowden gave up his freedom and went on the run to let people know that the government is working on a machine to spy on you, to take your information, to build profiles on every single person out there. So just think about that. Now we have another one, and he was connected with Edward Snowden. Julian Assange was the founder of WikiLeaks. Um, some background about Julian Assange. He is man, his story is really sad, okay? In 1991, he was by the way, this guy is Australian. Um, he was discovered in 1991 with a group of friends of his, joking around, messing around, doing what teenage boys do, or young adult boys or whatever do, and they were discovered hacking into the Melbourne terminal of Nortel, which is a Canadian telecom corporation. Basically, they just did it for the lulz. In 1996, he pled guilty, but he got a lenient penalty due to, quote unquote, absence of malicious or mercenary intent. This guy pled guilty to joking around with his buddies and going places he shouldn't have online. And they said, "Yeah, we get it. You're just screwing around. You didn't mean anything by it. Okay, well, we'll let you off easy." He goes on in 1993 to help Victoria Police Child Exploitation Unit to discover and prosecute a CP ring. I'm not telling you what CP means. If you don't know, then why are you on the internet? um, basically, he's done a lot of things to help his government. In the same year that he helped discover the ring, he was involved in starting the very first internet service provider in Australia. In 1994, he was the author or co-author, sources differ, of TCP Port Scanner Probe. He worked on patches to the database management system PostgreSQL. He worked on Usenet caching software NNTP cache. He worked on rubber hose deniable encryption system. He built SurfRaw, which is a command line interface for web-based search engines. He moderated AU Crypto Forum. He ran Best of Security, which is a website giving advice on computer security, and had 5,000 subscribers in 1996. And he contributed to research to Sulet Dreyfus's Underground, which is a 1997 book about Australian hackers. This is Julian Assange, people. Yeah. So he is under fire because from 2007 to 2010, well, no, this is more good stuff that he did. From 2007 to 2010, he traveled the world on WikiLeaks business. He published internet censorship lists, leaks, revelations. He exposed plans of drone strikes in Yemen, corruption across the Arab world, extrajudicial executions by Kenyan police, exposed the 2008 Tibetan unrest in China, and also the Petrogate oil scandal in Peru. Now, a man who has done all of this in his short lifetime. Um, in November of 2010, after going across the world from government to government exposing their corruption, he he hits he hits land in America. He has gone across the world exposing government corruption, and he comes to America, and unfortunately this is where this poor man finally comes up against people who are very willing and very capable of going after him. So in November 2010, he published 250,000 US diplomatic cables known as the Cablegate Files. And he worked with the Western media and news sources to be able to publish these. These are files that showed US espionage against the UN and other allies of the United States. Um, Basically, this is a bunch of files that are sort of like snitch on myself documents of bad things that the American government is doing. There was one that was a full on civilian execution airstrike during Iraq. Um, Various war crimes committed across Iraq and Afghanistan. Um, Basically, just chit chat, chatter, work notes between American government officials that were backpatting themselves about how they're, plotting against other allies. The UK, the UN, all across. Just yeah. So Julian Assange. Um, so what's happened to these guys for being upstanding citizens, upstanding people, and getting this information out to us? Well, I don't know why it did that. Um, Snowden is still hiding out in Russia somewhere. He had to flee America and go to Russia. His girlfriend eventually joined him in Russia, and he was granted citizenship. They got married, they had a baby. Now they spend their time kind of taunting the US, like, neener, neener, haha, you can't catch me. This was their Halloween picture. They dressed up as Where's Waldo and Carmen Sandiego and did like a green screen in front of a green screen of the FBI building. Very funny. Uh, Kind of good story for them. Probably not so good now with all the unrest in Russia, but like, it's not as bad as what Assange is going through right now. Um, he fled to Ecuador, and he basically was allowed to stay there. Um, he was notes. He was granted asylum in Ecuador, and um, as time went on, now remember earlier when I said that Assange helped the Australian Police Department uncover a CP ring and basically prosecute the guys who were responsible for that, the people who were responsible for that. The US tried to trump up charges of CP on Assange to get him to America to prosecute him. Uh, Obviously, that didn't hold water, and eventually it was decided that there just wasn't evidence for that, so it was dropped. Basically, it was Assange was able to get the counter evidence to say, hey, that didn't happen. But unfortunately, the Ecuador government caved, and they had a lot of difficulties and stuff, and so basically they caved. The UK police were allowed to come in and arrest him. Ecuador stood back and let him take him away. So he has been in prison in the UK for a long time now. This is such a sad instance of what can happen if you speak out, and not even about your own government. Because he had all of this information on American government officials spying on and collaborating against their allies. The UK government imprisoned him in a Category A prison in the UK, which is the highest level security. He was in there with IRA militants, jihadis, and murderers. He was in isolation for 20 or more hours a day. He was allowed 2 business and 2 social visits a week. Phone calls limited to 10 minutes. Eventually, he was allowed, after fighting and fighting and fighting, he was eventually allowed to get married to his girlfriend, and they have a couple of children, and they've been allowed visits, but the whole story is really incredibly sad. And they've been basically trying to appeal for his freedom. America is trying to get him extradited to America to be able to prosecute him under their laws. Um, and the UK government doesn't want to give him up. They claim because the American prison systems are so bad that they believe that he will kill himself because he does have diagnosed depression and autism spectrum disorder. But even still, over there in the UK, he has already suffered a minor stroke. And if all that's going on is he's being isolated really bad and he's not being, I don't know, hurt or beaten up on or something, whatever, um, how could he have suffered a stroke like that? It's just crazy. It's wild. Um, so he's eventually, if the US does have the ability to get a hold of him, if it's suspected it's more of a when than an if, um, they were talking about putting him in ADX Supermax prison in Florence, Colorado, and he could serve decades. Uh, but the absolute hypocrisy of this is that Biden, the current US President Biden, um, has called for other countries to free American journalists on the grounds of freedom of press. But he continues to pursue extraditing Assange um, so that they can get their hands on him. Like, how is that? It's not okay. Anyways, so moving on. So, yes, this is a conspiracy. Wake up. Your government is spying on you. The government is spying on you. Not just America, it's plenty of other governments around the world. They're already implementing or have already implemented surveillance state measures. Um, Not to keep track of bad guys, but so that they can take down political dissidents. Don't worry about it though. I'm sure the government won't put a stop to freedom of speech. It's okay. Okay, so yeah, hackers. Um, yeah, I mean, hackers, they're the bad guys, right? They're the ones that we should be concerned about, right? Right? No. Hackers are going to go after one thing and one thing only. They're going to go after money. Um, or they're going to do some silly little prank like hacking a New York billboard or something so that they can make it say balls or something. I don't know. Um, Hackers can be stopped pretty easily, especially if it's in regards to them stealing your money. Just go to your bank and report your credit card stolen, have it cut off, get them to give you your money back. It's not a hard process. Um, who do you go to though to report when your government is taking your information? Who do you report when the government has your name, your address, your phone number, how many children you have, what your political leaning is, what is your sexual orientation, your gender, do you prefer Pepsi or Coke? Who do you go to? Because I promise you, this is going to be the government's response. So, but yeah, I mean, the government's not going to hurt its citizens, right? Yeah. Um, yeah. This is in China. Um, and Russia. Yeah. How how many protesters have been fined for protesting, which is their right to protest. It is their right to freedom of speech. How many have been put in jail? How many have been killed because they spoke out? This is even happening in the US. You're seeing it everywhere now, across the globe. But yeah, this is America. We have our freedoms. We have our. You've got the right to all kinds of things, don't you? Even the very news outlets and sources that you might rely on are bought, paid, and even threatened by the government to lie about what the government is getting up to. And they made it legal to do so. Just let that sink in here for a second. So, what do we do? Panic? Is it time to panic yet? Are you panicking? No, like, it's okay. It's all right, You just, now you live in a surveillance state nation, and the government isn't really actually your buddy. Uh, but, it's okay. It's all right. There. No big deal, right? So what do you do about this? Do you believe me now? Don't worry. Subscribe to my channel and I'll tell you more about it in my next video. Just kidding. These are some people that you can look into. Um, this David Bomball, he has a YouTube channel. Um, he does talks with other people about cybersecurity information, various news and what's going on in the world and what's happening. He has a lot of interesting content. Rob Braxman is another one that you can find on YouTube and Twitter. These two guys are on YouTube and Twitter. Uh, I also made a Twitter recently. So yeah, you can find all of us on Twitter. Rob Braxman does a lot of informational security, cybersecurity. He has actually also made and sells his own de-Googled phones. Yes, you should check him out. He's pretty awesome. And then we also have Richard Stallman. Now you're gonna have to look this guy up. I don't recommend Google. Personally, I recommend using a VPN and DuckDuckGo for a website. But Richard Stallman is known as the father of the free software movement. Richard Stallman, uh, you might be able to find him in some other people's YouTube videos where he gives talks and lectures. But like I said, look him up using your not Google search engine. And then we have this is my husband. He has a YouTube channel called Geist Protocol. If you can figure out what that means, then congrats, you are as smart as him. Don't worry, that's not that smart. um, so his channel is new, and he's basically going over a lot of different things, talking about different tools that you can use to protect your information, protect your identity. Then we also have Mental Outlaw. He does Linux software tech videos. He also kind of goes in some of his videos and uncovers shady company practices from shady businesses. Some of his stuff is pretty good too. And then you have Adrian Crenshaw, who talks about Tor and onion routing, hackers, informational security. He's like the dark web guy. Like if you want to know stuff about what really happens on the dark web, ooh, scary. No, it's not really. It's not really scary. It's funny. So these are some people that you can look up or go check out on YouTube. And so that is it for this video, and thank you for watching. If you liked this, please like and subscribe. For real this time. um, if you have anything interesting to add in the comments below, I'll keep an eye out and welcome conversation, of course. Keep marching forward with your eyes open. Yes, this is the China uh, forces. And remember, Big Brother is always watching you. Oh, yeah. Anyways. And here's some of my sources if they're not going to be stupid. No, it's totally going to be stupid. That's fine. Anyways, thanks for watching and bye!